And welcome for all of you who are watching. You're tuned into TMH as we present you our daily English news. Our headlines for today: Tigray government is hoping commission will sufficiently establish the genocide that has been committed on the people of Tigray. Western countries call for an immediate halt to military offensives in the ongoing war on Tigray, Ethiopia. And activists say, and writers also include, saying Eritrea on course to a double suicide. As we move on to our main updates for today, the government of Tigray expresses hope for the International Commission of Human Rights experts on Ethiopia willing to sufficiently establish the commission of atrocity crimes committed in Tigray, including this ongoing genocide. The government of Tigray has issued a statement on the extension of the mandate of the International Commission of Human Rights experts on Ethiopia, and Timnit Bayru has further details.
The government of Tigray welcomed the adoption of the resolution on the grave human rights situation in Ethiopia on October 7, 2022, during the 51st session of the UN Human Rights Council, renewing, among other things, the mandate of the Commission for another year. The government of Tigray said it is encouraged to learn that the Human Rights Council welcomed the report of the Commission and its recommendations. This momentous decision comes against the disturbing backdrop of the genocidal Ethiopian and Eritrean regimes' latest invasion of Tigray, in which the deliberate brutalization of civilians in contravention of international human rights and humanitarian laws has become a part of the invaders' daily routine, it said. The government of Tigray is hopeful that the Commission will formalize the preliminary findings contained in its report and sufficiently established that the invading forces of Ethiopia and Eritrea committed atrocity crimes, including genocide, on the people of Tigray. The statement underlined that the ongoing genocide is state-sponsored and fueled by hate speech, the dehumanization of Tigrayans, and the criminalization of the Tigrayan identity, creating a permissive environment for systematic assaults on Tigrayans. The statement added that the Ethiopian regime continues to pay lip service to the idea of justice by putting two national mechanisms in place, supposedly to ensure accountability, namely the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the Inter-Ministerial Task Force. However, both institutions have been deployed to create the appearance that the Abiy regime is heeding international calls for accountability while scuttling efforts to ensure it in practice. The statement indicated that the organs of the state are accused of heinous crimes against the people of Tigray and cannot be credible agitators of conflict or impartial dispensers of justice. The government of Tigray also brought to the Council's attention the Ethiopian regime's organized efforts to undermine the independence and impartiality of the Commission. It recalled that by preventing the Commission members from visiting Tigray, the Ethiopian regime has made it nearly impossible for the Commission to fulfill its investigative duties. The attainment said, since the long arm of the genocidal forces has reached every corner of Tigray, the entire Tigray is a vast crime scene. It added, however, that a credible investigation cannot be conducted without having access to the crime scene. It called on the Council and the wider international community to use every tool at their disposal, including a package of punitive sanctions, to compel the Ethiopian regime to allow the Commission to do its work without impediments. It also stressed the need for the Commission to be transparent in its work so that the integrity of the investigation is beyond reproach. The government of Tigray called upon the UN Secretary General to provide all necessary resources, including additional expertise on the rights of children, conflict-related sexual and gender-based violence, and forensics. It also called upon the wider UN system to allocate adequate budget from assessed contributions and encourages UN member states to contribute earmarked funding. The government of Tigray reiterated its commitment to cooperate with the Commission, and it undertakes its independent investigation. It added it will do its part to ensure the victims of atrocities secure the justice they deserve, irrespective of their identities and locations.
Thank you, Timnit. And in related news, the government of Tigray has said that the Eritrean government is taking annihilation measures against the Kunama and Irob communities. The government of Tigray, in a statement, noted that the Ethiopian and Eritrean regimes have suffered a few too much consequences thus far, continue to target civilians through indiscriminate aerial bombardments and artillery shelling, exacting a considerable price from civilians across the entire region. It also disclosed that the Eritrean regime, in particular, has intensified its genocidal campaign against the people of Tigray, going on murderous rampages against the Kunama people as well as the Irob communities with ruthless savagery. It also added that while the regime has also targeted Eritrean Kunama who had fled persecution and fan sanctuary in Tigray, it also kills Tigrayan Kunamas with heinous savagery, making its clear intent on genocidal actions. Getachew Reda, writing on his official Twitter account on the issue, criticized the international community's deafening silence. Having failed in their attempt to control Tigray, the coalition of Isaias Afwerki and Abiy Ahmed have been particularly active in targeting civilians in what Getachew said is a textbook example of evidence on genocidal intent. Kunamas both sides of the border are being summarily executed, while villages burned and everything Tigrayan indiscriminately attacked, and gleefully so, he wrote once again on his official Twitter account. Western countries call for immediate halt of all military offensives that are going on currently in Tigray, Ethiopia. Australia, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, UK, and the United States, in a joint statement on resumption of hostilities in northern Ethiopia, said that they are profoundly concerned by the escalation of the ongoing conflict and the humanitarian crisis in the northern region. They called on the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray regional authorities to immediately halt their military offensives, agree to a cessation of hostilities, and pursue a negotiated settlement through peace talks under the African Union-led process. They also called on all parties to allow unhindered humanitarian access, ensure the safety and security of humanitarian workers, and cooperate with and facilitate access for the international human rights monitors. The countries also condemned the escalating involvement of Eritrean military forces in northern Ethiopia. We call on Eritrean forces to cease their military operations, withdraw from the northern region of Ethiopia, and all foreign actors should cease action that fuel this conflict as well. The statement published by the U.S. Department underlined that any durable solution must include accountability for human rights abuses and the violations that continue to be committed till this day. Activists and writers alike say Eritrea on course to a double suicide. Yosef Gobrahiwet, in an interview with Tigray TV's Maqala Foresight, likened that the Eritrean government with a parasite that is finishing devouring the insides of its hosts, the Eritrean people, and added that the regime, bent on its sole preoccupation of extending its life at any cost, has now found a new host in Ethiopia and the country. Let's take a listen.
It's eating the weakest part of the population right now. Which ones are they? The overage, as I told you, the 50, 60s, and 65 years old. The younger. Nowadays, the Eritrean army, a good chunk of it is made up of child soldiers, even children and underage. And then the woman that has been to some extent spared up to recent time, are now being forced to enter in large numbers. So what it is doing is, it has jumped from the young men and women. It's still devouring them, but it's also now devouring those population groups that are the weakest part of Eritrea. That's one way. It's still towards its death, but it only wants to extend its life. Only wants to extend its life that way. But the most interesting part is it has found out that this is not enough. Eritrea would collapse, facing especially Tigray, the TDF, with the weakest part of the population making up the overwhelming majority of its army. So what is it trying to do is, it is planning, it's doing it, in fact, not planning, and it's bringing a huge number of armies from Ethiopia as a host now, So it's so that it could, it depends on them to survive, to extend its life.
Eritrea continues to commit unimaginable atrocities in the north. Genocide studies experts criticizes UN agencies' non-cooperation and probe into human rights violations within Ethiopia. Mukesh Kapila, professor of global health and humanitarian affairs at the University of Manchester, attributed the refusal of some UN agencies to provide information to the complicity of individuals in decision-making inside these agencies in Ethiopia and politically motivated decisions by the leadership in the global capitals as well. Let's take a listen.
The lack of cooperation of the so-called humanitarian agencies who call themselves humanitarian agencies and who speak about human security and all the principles we talk about is, I think, even more disgusting and reprehensible. You expect the Ethiopian federal authorities not to collaborate. And obviously, I would have been very surprised if Eritrea had not collaborated. But the lack of cooperation from the guardians of the values of the UN is, I think, the most appalling expression of cynicism in this whole exercise.
Professor Kapila said that the genocidal campaign on the people of Tigray has now entered into a whole new phase.
Tigray-Ethiopia conflict with Eritrean involvement, this is just entering into the next phase. And the next phase is that now all pretense has gone. We know that terrible things which only activists were saying on the ground or some pioneering journalists had identified are now common knowledge. There even commissions of inquiry are saying these kinds of things. And if you talk to people privately in, unrecorded, they will say that yes, what's going on is terrible, and they acknowledge that bad things, terrible things are happening, you see. So with no pretense there is nothing to hold you back. Now there's only one thing to go for, and that is total war. So this is the genocidal conflict entering the next phase of annihilation, where, and all that has happened so far, there'll be no point of it if you didn't enter that phase now. I'm speaking to the perspective of the genocidaire. If I was a person scheming to get rid of all the people, to eliminate these people, there's no point in stopping now. You got to do and finish the job. This is what Hitler tried to do with the Jews in Europe. Why stop at 1 million or 2? He was forced to stop when he reached 6 million, but otherwise it would have gone and on and on and on and on.
Irish Examiner writes unseen war on Tigray raging, quote-unquote, forgotten by the rest of the world. The newspaper reported that Tigray conflict in Ethiopia appears not only to have been forgotten by the rest of the world, but to be one of which could, without much promoting, become one of the greatest humanitarian disasters in living memory. According to Irish Examiner, the ongoing war, hidden behind a government siege, which has severed communication sieges, which is also completely unreported because of journalists, are largely locked out and has left 5.2 million people urgently needing emergency and across territory the size of Switzerland. Artillery barrages, drone strikes, pitched battles have pulled in neighboring countries and have reportedly involved hundreds of thousands of combatants. In recent weeks, according to UN observers, hundreds of civilians have died and millions more displaced. It's said that taking forced civilians of the region are very high, adding that the African Union proposed negotiations that were supposed to take place last week has been canceled now. Irish Examiner urged the international community to work together, stop this conflict that is currently worsening with each passing day with humanitarian nightmares for the entirety Horn of Africa. Meanwhile, Ethiopian government is using debt relief and funding by the international institutions to help underwrite an ongoing genocide. Omna Tigrai reported, despite compelling evidence from human rights organizations and news outlets, that Ethiopian government forces are carrying out a genocide in Tigray, Ethiopia. International financial institutions continue to send hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to the Ethiopian government. Omna Tigrai noted that this funding is more likely than not is being used to finance this genocide. It called on the World Bank and the IMF to immediately and punitively take action against the Ethiopian regime responsible for this Tigray genocide. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has already admitted that Ethiopia has spent 100 billion birr, close to 2.3 billion US dollars, nearly 20% of the annual budget, was used to wage war against its own people. The atrocities and the actions of the Ethiopian government are horrifying and must be stopped immediately. Amna Tigrai pointed out a troubling double standard in which the U.S. and the international community are rightly outraged by the ongoing wrongdoing carried out by the regime, prompting widespread condemnation, sanctions, and implementation of financial monitoring systems, and a halt to aid completely in Myanmar. Yet, 8 months of human rights abuses in Tigray have inexplicably failed to trigger any semblance of tough response from the same international community. The International Monetary Fund has also turned a blind eye to the atrocities being committed in the Tigray region and plans to issue $650 billion in aid to countries through a new special drawing rights, which has the ability to raise Ethiopian reserves by more than 10%. In addition, the IMF welcomed Ethiopia's request to join the G20 Common Framework for Debt Relief, which has been criticized for lacking transparency as well as accountability. Amna Tigrai said that there's policies by the IMF that are irresponsible and make it easy for the Ethiopian government to use debt relief and funding to help underwrite this ongoing genocide. On the other hand, Tigrayans all over the world continue to confront officials of Abiy Ahmed wherever they may find them and appear outside of Ethiopia for enabling this ongoing genocide on Tigray. And one Tigrayan encountered with Abiy Ahmed's finance minister, Ahmed Shide, who was here in the U.S. soliciting money for war in Tigray, is an exemplary deed in the exploding genocider's task. Let's take a listen.
Mohammed Shade, Ante Gadai, you are a killers. You guys are killer. Ethiopian killers here. You killed my dad. Ante Gadai, ልትገድል ለትግራይ ህዝብ ብር ልታገኝ መስሎሃል? አታገኝም። አንተ ገዳይ ዞር በል፣ እንዳትነካኝ ገዳይ killers. Ethiopian, those are Ethiopian killers. They kill so many Tigrayan people. You're a killer. You have blood in your hands. You have Tigray blood in your hand. You too. ገዳዮች ገና የልጅ ልጆቻችሁ ታሪክ የሰራችሁት ትገኛለህ። አንተ ሌባ ባለጌዎች ገዳዮች killer. You're a killer. He's a killer. You are a killer. Don't touch me. አንተ ገዳይ አንተ ሌባ ገዳይ የትግራይ ህዝብ ጨረሳችሁት። እናንተ ሌቦች፣ እናንተ ገዳዮች የልጅ ልጆቻችሁን አትኖሯትም ዓለም ውስጥ። ዞር በል። Don't touch me. You are a killer. ሌባ killer genocider. You have blood in your hand. You have Tigray blood in your hand. He's a killer. You are a killer. You have blood in your hand. አንተ ገዳይ አንተ ሌባ የለም አታገኟትም ብር ሌባ ገዳይ አንተ ገዳይ ሌባ. He's a killer. Look at him. He's a killer. He's Ethiopian killer. He killed so many people in Tigray. አንተ ገዳይ ሌባ አታገኝም ብር አታገኝም. Killers. Ethiopian killers. They are the genociders. He's a genocider. He's a killer. He's Ethiopian killer. He's a genocider. He killed so many Tigrayan people. You are genocider. Don't touch me. You are a killer. You Ethiopian killers. They kill so many Tigrayan people. They are genociders. You have blood on your hand. Killers. They kill so many our people. They kill my dad. Okay. Don't touch me. I have rights.
That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.